Hello and welcome back to the SaaS Marketing Weekly podcast with me, your host Ryan, the founder of Rocket SaaS. And today I am back in the studio with my main man, Jamie. How are you? Welcome back.
I'm really good. It's been a good week. Yeah.
Good. Why has it been a good week?
There's lots going on. Lots going on in the agency. We had an event this week, a webinar. Obviously, we're recording the pod today. Lots of new business coming in, which is exciting.
We've hired about
new hires.
3 people this week. It's all happening at Rocket SaaS. Very exciting. But today we are here to teach you how to get leads in the door fast. So we're going to go through 6 different campaign ideas if you need revenue in the business fast, which most people either do want revenue in the business fast, or it certainly doesn't hurt to get a bit more fast revenue into the business. So these are specific campaigns, mainly targeting people that are at the bottom of the funnel, don't need to go through too much of a long sales cycle. They're kind of ready to go. How do you surface them? How do you get revenue in the door fast? So the first one is digging into your closed lost. So presumably all of you have a CRM. If you don't, you should definitely be getting one. And closed lost, for those of you that don't know, means the deals that you lost. So the deals that you almost signed, whether you got to the discovery call phase or the demo or the sales call or whatever, for some reason they decided not to work with you. And in that closed loss, there is absolute gold for most businesses. There is undoubtedly deals in there. They chose not to work with you, often because they couldn't afford to work with you at the time. Well, you know, if they've been sat in that closed loss column for months and months and months, there's a high probability that they may now have the money. They just kind of forgot about you. Another reason why is because they decided to go with another provider. So again, if they've been sat in that closed loss column for months or years, there's a high chance that they are not happy with that provider and they are, you know, on the verge of switching. And numerous other reasons as to why they could be sat in that closed loss. You lost them not necessarily because they didn't like you. It could have been really come down to the wire, or just purely come down to budget. So there are people in there that you should, that should always be where you should start when you want to bring in revenue fast. So Jamie, you probably got a few different ideas around that. Let's get into it.
Yeah, definitely. I think obviously, like, if you need revenue fast, you want to get as close to revenue as possible. So I think closed loss is always a good place to go and look. Like, something brought them to the business at one point, so they already know who you are. They've heard the pitch. They was interested enough to come.
You've done the hard bit.
Yeah, exactly. You've done the marketing. They know who you are, getting on the radar, all that. But the thing that, like, now, like, if they've been in closed loss for a while, I think what's really powerful about reaching back out to those people is that you also know a lot more about that specific person in that specific company than you would any other company out there. Like, realistically, like, if you go out to, like, all of your target account list, you're not going to know what that one person might need in their business, what that business looks like in depth, unless you've spoken to them personally. You have in these closed loss accounts. You know what the business has looked like at one point. You know what their challenges have been. You know what they were challenged with when you were speaking to them. And you know how that conversation went. So you know what kind of, like you mentioned, what didn't result in the deal being closed, what might have changed since then. And so, to be honest, all of the messaging and all the stuff you need to go out with is kind of there for you. It's all kind of the research, everything that you would want to be able to write the perfect marketing message is already there. Yeah,
that's a good point, actually. That this is a lesson in the exercise of keeping good notes in your CRM. Yeah. So I have been in the past extremely guilty of this in terms of, like, someone says they don't want to work with us, and I'm like, just drag them into closed lost and you know, go and sulk. What I should do is add some notes into the CRM. These are the reasons why they chose not to work with us. This budget, or it was the boss never gave sign off, or they chose someone else. And so it's really important to add those notes all the way through the conversation, even when the deal is still live. But it's really important when there is closed lost, as you categorize them. Why did they close lost? And also, those notes that I just mentioned, because you want to be revisiting this deal later down the line. And those notes are going to be really, really helpful, because when you reach out to them, you can say, I remember that you said that you didn't quite have the funding. Did you manage to raise the funding? So you can just make the outreach a bit more personal in terms of just, otherwise it would just be generic because there are no notes and you can't remember why they closed last. So, another emphasis there to be keeping really good notes. But let's say that, okay, I'm in my CRM, I'm in my closed loss column. There's 100 deals in there that have been in there for the last 18 months or so. what are the actual tactics? What are the strategies to reach out to these people? There must be a few different ways we can do it.
Yeah, definitely. So I think as well, just kind of sorting through that 100, I'll definitely be looking for the ones, especially if we've got notes. But even if we haven't got notes and we've got like, we can go back through the emails in that deal. We can go back through the comms. We can speak to the salesperson in that deal. I would definitely figure out kind of what was the key reason it didn't happen. Things like timing, they went with a competitor, etc. And then think about, okay, how can we outreach to those people based on what happened in the deal? So like, for example, let's say it's something around going with a competitor, like particularly if kind of you know what that competitor was and you know what their typical kind of contract might be, I'd definitely be looking at, are they coming up for renewal? And then you're thinking about, right, let's tailor all of the outreach around kind of that moment, because ultimately that's probably the best in you're going to have with that buyers. If they went with a competitor, they went with a competitor for a reason.
That's a good point, actually. Yeah, about the contract length. So sometimes people don't tell you, oh, I'm going with this competitor and they have a 6-month contract length. It's unlikely they're going to tell you that specific information. But if you do know, if you're in a relatively small space and you probably know which competitor they went with, you should hopefully know what the average contract length is with your main competitor or competitors. And then, you can have notes in your closed loss to be like, reach out at this time because probably coming up for renewal. That's a good point.
So you've got that personalization like angle, and that should feed into the messaging. The same for things like timing, etc. So that should feed into it 100%. But another thing I think is important is to think about interesting ways to kind of activate that person and kind of get them back interested. Like you can just go out with kind of just this use some like normal outreach, like I just mentioned. But I'd also be thinking about things like gifting is a good one. So like, for example, you've definitely been speaking, the salesperson in particular has been speaking to that prospect for a long time. In some deals, it can go on for months and months and months and months. They probably actually know the person relatively well. So like they probably know a little bit about kind of them, their work, them as a person. There's probably some ideas for a gift in there to kind of like get them back engaged with you. Like you can use things like reach desk to kind of automate that sort of stuff. But I'd definitely be thinking about that sort of sweetener to kind of get them back into kind of an engagement with you. And then the other thing I'd be thinking about, and this is something I think can be really powerful, particularly if the reason that you, as a SaaS business in particular, if you lost the deal because you didn't have a feature or a functionality at the time that you have now, like using a tool like Storylane, so an interactive demo tour builder, you could build an interactive demo very quickly. It's not hard to do. It's like a screenshot builder if you haven't used Storylane before. Build a demo of that specific use case, show how your product now accomplishes that goal, and share that with the prospect.
Yeah, that is a good point, because also one of maybe it's not quite the case with B2B SaaS always, but certainly one of your biggest competitors in any industry, no matter what you do, is the status quo. I don't mean the band. I mean them. They just decided not to work with you, and they decided not to work with anyone. They've decided to continue doing what they're doing. They decided to continue running the thing with spreadsheets. Decided, just not to invest in anything. That's often the number one thing in closed lost. Therefore, as Jamie says, if your product has now got better, then you should be getting it in front of those people, and you should be saying, oh, we've got these new features, we've got the new benefits, like Jamie said, an interactive demo. You can just ping it over to them, and some of you may be thinking, oh well, I've already do that with my email newsletter, and everybody in my closed lost is in my email newsletter. They probably unsubscribed, or they no offense, they probably or maybe they get the email but they don't open it. Email newsletters don't get the greatest of open rates in the world, and they certainly don't get the most greatest of refresh. Particularly, if I'm not your customer, I don't care about your features necessarily. So just because you've got an email newsletter talking about features doesn't mean that they're actually kind of reading it, or they may.
Some people just don't read them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So in terms of reaching out to these people, so obviously email. Email the person. There's also LinkedIn DMs as well. And the other thing is that if these people have been sat in your closed loss for a long time, there's a high probability that they have left the business. So don't give up if that is the case. You want to go on LinkedIn Sales Navigator, you want to find the person that replaced them, or if you can't, or that person didn't get replaced because they got made redundant, you want to look at the CEO or whoever the person that is going to be making the decision. And that's often I've had success doing this before, is you reach out to go, hey, I see you're new in the role. I was previously speaking to Dave. I see that he's moved on. Dave and I were quite close to working together to do X, Y, and Z. Is it something that is on your mind since you've come into this role 3 months ago? Is is it worth picking up the conversation? Dave absolutely loved us, by the way. That's that sort of that can really reignite a deal. And then there's potential. The only other thing that I can think of, you may have some other ideas, is putting the closed loss people into retargeting ads just to get you front of mind. I presume that's
100%. Like, I think ultimately, like, you want to get in front of those people because, like, I do think that, like, I was talking to a colleague at Rocket SaaS the other day, actually, a little bit about this. When he was working at his previous job, he did a big analysis on, there was a lot of customers, but he did a big analysis on the customer base, and he found a massive trend in basically closed loss deals coming back. Like, if there's, especially in a space where, like, people do move or bounce around in tools, like, there's always going to be an opportunity there. So, like, the more you can get in front of them, the more context you can get about why they left and form those messages, like, the better.
Closed loss is really good for my business. I mean, if we lose deals, particularly to another agency, there's a lot of bad agencies out there. It doesn't take long till they get pretty pissed off with that agency and results are bad and customer service, etc. And then they come crawling back to me. And I'm like, I told you shouldn't have gone with them. Closed loss is brilliant for that. And a lot of people that listen and watch this podcast are small SaaS providers, and therefore you're losing deals to big competitors. And often the big competitors aren't very good at things like customer service and support and annoying price rises. So, very common story. So closed loss should be your first port of call when you want to bring revenue into the business. But let's move on to the second one. We got to get 6 to get through here. We need to speed up here. The second one is talking about deal acceleration. Yeah. So again, if you need revenue in the business soon, you're worried about cash flow, you're worried you can't afford to pay salaries if you don't get revenue into the business now. Hopefully there are some deals in the pipeline, and obviously a lot of you work it in very long, annoying sales cycles. How do we urgently speed up those sales cycles? If you've got people in the pipeline and it's just dragging out, how can we just shorten that time down? So Jamie, I know you've got some ideas around that.
Yeah, I'll keep this one short and sweet so we can move into number 3. But I think one of my favorite things to do when it comes to deal acceleration, particularly as a demand gen marketer, so I've got my kind of lens on, is particularly when you've got like a deal where it's kind of complex buying committees, multiple people involved in the deal, targeting that account and targeting all of those departments, and basically targeting those specific departments that are in the deal with all of the messaging that you would want them to know about the product is something I think can be really, really helpful. Because ultimately, what can often happen is, like, sales bring someone into the deal. It's like kind of their champion. They bring multiple stakeholders in who know maybe a little bit about the business, but probably don't have all the context they need. They don't know anything about kind of our brand or the people behind it. They're not as bought in, basically. So the more that we can do to kind of bring those people up to speed, the easier, hopefully, we can make that deal cycle for the sales team. And I think that's a really helpful way that we can just have that surround sound effect in the account. So that would be the big one for me, is kind of having that sort of, like, when you've got that multiple sort of complex buying committee, getting a whole account, targeting all those people, specific messaging for each, and making sure they understand who we are, what we do, and why we're different.
Discounts, I presume. Like if you sign up by the end of this quarter, you can be kind of, I wouldn't be totally honest about cash flow problems, but you can be honest about, we're trying to hit target for this quarter. So if you sign up by the end of the quarter, we'll give you a 10% discount on the whole subscription.
Yeah, 100%. Like, I think ultimately it depends on where you are as a business. If you need that, like we said, if you need the revenue now, right, then use the discounts, especially if it's not going to hurt you, like, in terms of what you're trying to get to, what your goals are at the moment. If the goal is to kind of just get to growth where you are now. And then the other thing I'd be thinking about is just like enablement. So, like, what assets are you giving to your buyer so they can sell internally? A lot of time that's kind of forgotten, and it's kind of just left to the person within that business to kind of sell into their organization. You need to ultimately own that kind of relationship and try and enable them as much as possible. And it even goes back to what we were talking about earlier, like those interactive demos specifically tailored for that business, like specific assets tailored for that business, like that, all that stuff can help.
And then the other thing is, it sort of seems obvious, but there's a lot of businesses, particularly small businesses, that are not doing this enough, is following up, like, consistently. So a lot of small businesses that don't have like a a head of sales or a really active sales department, if the sales just falls on the founder, people can be very British about it. And, you send the proposal or you do the demo and then they ghost you, and you might send one chaser a week later and they ignore your chaser, and then you just leave it and you don't do anything with it. I've been guilty of that in the past, but these really fast growth businesses, what do you think they do? They do not give up. They call the prospect every single day. They email them every single day until they get an answer. They DM them, hey, maybe you've not been getting my emails. Maybe my email's been going into spam. Don't suppose you can get back to me on LinkedIn DMs. Keep following up. If you are desperate for revenue and you want revenue in, do more. The more follow-ups you do, the more likelihood you are, to make that sale, within reason, without completely pissing them off. But yeah, that's what fast growth businesses do, is that they, don't give up until they get an answer. And sometimes it's surprising. Sometimes I have a deal in my kind of HubSpot and they've ghosted me a couple of times, and I think, I'll just give them another chaser. Give them a chaser, and they respond, oh yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, I've been away, I've been ill. I'm actually, thanks for actually getting in touch. Let's have a meeting with my boss, and it just reignites. But if you don't do that, then it's it's not going to happen. So that's the other thing. It's just to be more vigorous and with your follow ups.
If a deal's in pipeline, it's more likely to close than you sourcing new business in that moment quickly. So definitely look at trying to accelerate the deals that you already have.
Okay, number 3 is high intent remarketing. So this doesn't particularly work for every business, but Jamie, you're the retargeting ads expert. Talk us through how this one works.
Yeah, so I think this one can work well if you have a big remarketing audience. So you have a sizable amount of people who have been visiting your website, have been engaging with your ads, and you've got a decent remarketing pool of buyers on LinkedIn who you can hit. I would be thinking about, quite often, you normally target them as kind of one big pool. How can we segment specific people off who have taken higher intent actions? So things like, have they visited the pricing page on the website? Have they visited the demo page on the website? And then think about, okay, all those people who have done those actions, visited to those specific pages, let's serve specific messaging that resonates with that specific action. So obviously, if it's around pricing, I'll be thinking about how can we combat any objections they may have around pricing, our pricing complexity, the packages, all of those things. And then if they've already been to the demo page, then I'll be thinking about, well, maybe we can serve them a different offer to get them into the funnel.
So maybe you move budget around, you're saying. So if you were really desperate for revenue now, you take some of the budget away from your top of funnel stuff like blogs and guides and podcast clips and all those things, and you would just hammer the budget into that high intent retargeting to the people that visited those high intent pages.
Yeah, but I think if we need revenue fast and like we're under pressure, like those people have taken those actions, we're hedging our bets that they're more likely to convert. And basically what we're saying is, for sure, because you can't do that forever because there's only a small amount of people. But what we're saying is, if we give them a really tailored message or a really tailored offer, tailored to that specific action, carve out some budget for that, that could be something that works for us, and just hedge our bets that we're going after the bottom of the funnel.
Okay, nice. We're on a roll here. Number 4, high intent Google Ads keywords. So similar to what you described there of like shifting some of the budget around, is that you look at your Google Ads, you look at your high intent keywords, you look at the keywords that have resulted in conversions, and then you do like a limited period where you are stopping some of the other more long tail keywords, and you're just hammering more budget into that.
I think this is good practice in general on Google Ads, but always sort of something, if you're really looking for kind of results fast, like you should always look at your Google Ads. Normally you have a bunch of keywords that you're bidding on in a typical Google Ads account. And Google Ads kind of, normally when you're running Google Ads, like you'll have a set of keywords that you let run and you test and stuff like that. But if you're really trying to drive results, you've got to look at, okay, what's converting, what's historically over months always converted, right? You look at what's converted, and then there's something, keeping it simple, there's a metric in Google Ads that shows called basic impression share. So basically what it means is, of all the searches that I could appear for that particular keyword, that particular search, of all the searches, what percentage of those searches am I appearing for, right? So let's say that on a keyword that I've been converting for like 6 months, I've only appeared in the last month for 10% of the possible searches I could have appeared for. There is massive room for me to get more conversions on that keyword because I could appear for more of those searches. So basically what I've got to do is carve out that keyword and dedicate more budget and basically make myself more competitive to appear for that particular search. And you try and drive up the impression share. So logically, what makes sense is I appear for that search more, that keyword more. I already convert on that keyword. The likelihood is I'm going to convert more on that keyword. And that's kind of just like a real kind of efficient bottom of funnel tactic to try and drive more juice from your Google ads. And in general, that's good practice. But like, particularly if you're kind of like thinking, oh, we need results now, I'd be looking there because that's real bottom of the funnel.
Yeah, I like that. Okay. And then number 5 is comparison campaigns. So again, we're looking at people here who are at the bottom of the funnel who are ready to buy soon. That means that those people are looking at your competitors and
they hate you deal with, basically.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So you're saying they could already be with a competitor. I was thinking they're considering working with a competitor, but I guess it's both.
Both could work.
Could be both. Yeah. Okay. So you've got the people that are, they know who your competitor are. They're Googling your competitor. Maybe they've done a demo or they're about to do a demo with a competitor. They're at the bottom of the funnel. They've got the budget. They're ready to buy. Or like Jamie said, the people that are already with the competitor and ideally they're not happy, which is not too dissimilar to what we talked about in the first tip here. But yeah, how do we capture those people that has a comparison?
So it's a good point you raised actually. So like even like on Google, it's a good point on Google. Like for a competitor campaign where people are searching for the competitors, that's definitely something that you should be thinking about because like it's expensive normally on Google, but ultimately, especially if you've got a good advantage over that competitor, that's definitely a tactic that can work if you need to get people through the door fast. They are actively searching for a solution like yours. So if you can position it in the right way, that's definitely a way to still away business. 100% agree with that. The next thing I was just going to say was like in terms of what I said, in terms of people who are just dissatisfied with a competitor, with their current tool. If we can pull a list of people who are using one of our competitor tools. Obviously, it kind of goes back to what we said earlier. Like they've already invested in a tool like yours. They kind of know the value of it. You haven't got to sell as hard. What you need to do is basically try and appeal to the people in that data set. That's who you're really marketing to, even though you're probably marketing to a wider list. You're marketing to the people of who's not happy with this tool and how do I position myself to try and capture those people and kind of win those people over. A good offer, like quite a good way of doing this is like offering your tool for free for a specific period whilst they're still on their contract with the alternative. That's always one way to do it, like a buyout offer kind of type thing as well. But that's something I'll be thinking about basically is like if they're searching for competitors, like you said, if they're using a competitor, there's less marketing that has to be done. So it's really just about how can we get those people like in touch with us with a good offer, I suppose.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. Yeah, I've seen that campaign work effectively, and that's similar to what we just talked about earlier in terms of speeding up the sales cycle. So unfortunately, it doesn't actually bring in revenue any quicker. But you can say if a deal is stalling because they say to you, "Oh, I've got 5 months left with my current supplier," you can say, "Well, you can sign up with us today, and I'll give you 5 months for free." So you're just not paying double bubble, and it gets the deal signed fast. It doesn't bring more revenue in, but at least you know that revenue's coming, which is often just as important as revenue almost. So that's another way of looking at it. And the final one, number 6, is to essentially just to do more outreach. If you are the founder of the business or even a marketer in the business, is to do more outreach. I remember many years ago when I was struggling to get leads for my business, and I had an advisor like NED, he's still with us, a guy called Alex, and he was like, Ryan, I want you to message 10 people a day on LinkedIn every single day. Pretty simple. Just go onto LinkedIn Sales Navigator. You know who your ideal customer profile is. I want you to, start with your first connections on LinkedIn. Go through all of them. You've got thousands of connections on LinkedIn. You should very easily be able to find a list of a bunch of people in your ideal customer profile. I want you to personally message 10 of them every morning before you start your day, before you check your emails, before you get bogged down in tasks and all that operational craziness of the business. Do not get involved in any of that until you have messaged 10 people, and just gives you that accountability. And if you message those 10 people and just try different messages, try different offers, always make sure it's a personal message rather than just a bot message. Don't not actually use those Meet Alfred bot tools where you just message the same people some generic crap. Make it personal. Make sure the opening line makes it realize that this person has actually written a message, because you make it personal about their website, their product, or a LinkedIn post they recently did or something. And if you message 10 people a day, it will not take long until you start getting some responses, and then you can start getting conversations going. So basically, hustle. You just need to hustle when you're really desperate to bring some revenue into the business. Don't just rely on the marketing team or even the sales team. Sometimes you've got to roll your sleeves up and do it yourself. LinkedIn is an amazing platform for that. And you can reach out to people and that keep doing that, and it can really draw up some business. That's an amazing exercise you should sort of try and do anyway. That's probably the best advice I can personally give in terms of, as a founder of a business that's really struggling, is just hustle, do it yourself, get out.
Nothing moves things forward than a one-to-one conversation. It's always going to be the things that move things forward the fastest.
Yeah, especially founder to founder, that often works well. So is that it? I think those are our 6 tips.
6. We got through that 5. We slammed through them after the first one.
The first one, which is probably the best one, I would say, closed loss is amazing. There's so many businesses that just have their closed loss sat there and they've just not done anything with it for years. We've been very guilty of that, and now we're not, and we're getting deals from it. So that's why we spent most time talking about closed loss. So definitely get stuck into that. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of the SaaS Marketing Weekly Podcast. We're on episode, I think we're on nearly 90 now. We're eking closer to that
big 100.
The big 100. I've put the pressure on now. I've no idea what I'm going to do for number 100, but looking forward to that. But anyway, I will see you next week on the SaaS Marketing Weekly Podcast.